Welcome back. This is the 20th episode of the Painted Privacy video series, and I'm the artificial avatar of Luca Bolognini, European data lawyer and essayist. In this episode, we'll talk about identity and internationality. We'll focus specifically on the Veneto region and European artists, especially since the Privacy Symposium 2026 begins in about a week, right here in Venice. The image here in the lower right corner is one of the most captivating mountain landscapes by Guglielmo Ciardi, a failed notary with a gift for realism and head of a family of painters whose paintings have been appreciated and sold all over the world from the time he was active at the turn of the 20th century. In the lower left corner instead, you can see The Rape of Europa by Titian from 1560, commissioned by Philip II of Spain, his fervent supporter, and housed in the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. You can glimpse mountains in the background, which is no surprise, firstly because Titian came from Pieve di Cadore, where you can still visit his birthplace and childhood home. Secondly, because Titian started out in Venice in Bellini's studio in Fondamenta Nove, later setting up his own home studio just a few meters away, and from the shores of Fondamenta Nove, you can see all the way to the Alps on a clear day. He had mountains in his bones and in his eyes, and he often, and happily I imagine, drew them into his paintings like figures, mountain ranges that are limits, watersheds, frontiers and borders, but that also invite and tempt us to cross over them, one step at a time, expatriating, exporting, and negotiating outside our comfort zone. So, what's the point of this strange meta-legal digression? Why am I telling you about Guglielmo Ciardi and Titian and their mountains that stretch beyond the horizon? For two reasons, which can be summed up in two words: identity and world. Let's start with the first, identity. Both Titian and Ciardi seem to use mountains as elements of identity, as a way of identifying their deep-rooted family origins. I like to think of those peaks, the same ones staring back at me now from outside as I write this, almost as subjects rather than objects. If, using an augmented reality app, I point my smartphone in the air to find out the name of each of those mountains, or should I say its more or less anthropized name, I wonder, how do you identify a mountain? Geologically, is there a well-grounded way of singling out its essence and identity, as can be done with a tooth and its root, or with a person in flesh and blood and mind? Or is this nothing more than a human convention, a scientific artifice, and does the body and soul of that peak, which we identify and distinguish from the others, actually constitute an inextricable whole with the neighboring mountains? And do the clouds, the snow, the melting ice, and other meteorological superstructures uniquely characterize their features like somatic traits, habits, and preferences? What about the forests that seamlessly connect mountain to mountain? Somewhat idle and animist musings, you might say, but with consequences nonetheless. The parallel with the unique identification and unique identities of people seems natural and inevitable, and yet it raises questions. Can family, cultural and social origins and customs and trends, like geological or meteorological superstructure layers, be considered personal characteristics even if they belong to a common dimension? These doubts may seem as futile or far-fetched as Magritte's castle of the Pyrenees, but these sorts of dilemma will increasingly clutter up the desks of privacyists. Does the common shared context, once it is referred to the individual, become personal data? Is the information about the weather, in this instance in the Dolomites, a piece of data that pertains to me, that could be exploited to better target me? And if so, should that data be protected so as to protect me? Could this be high-level profiling, or high altitude at least? The second keyword, world, is easy to explain. Ciardi was a local artist, but with international reach, and his paintings can still be found in museums and the most prestigious auction houses worldwide. Titian, on the other hand, unlike Tintoretto and Veronese, was the first truly European painter, with patrons and admirers far beyond the borders of the Italian states, from Austria to France and Spain. I picked up this Titianesque definition some time ago from the comments of the renowned art historians Bernard Eikemer and Charles Hope in Pieve di Cadore during the preview of Hope's extraordinary work, Titian Sources and Documents. I come back to a leitmotif that I never get tired of repeating. Whoever deals with privacy and data law today is necessarily a European, pan-European, if not global professional. Our clients, counterparties, scientific and institutional interlocutors are elsewhere. The national context is certainly important, to be taken care of and valorized with its trove of interpretations and principles, but the rules, negotiations, controls, comparisons, technologies, and consultations are now cross-border. The Titian artist was deeply rooted in Veneto and Venice, but the Titian businessman was highly international in his exchanges. Let's take inspiration from his studio for our boutique law firms. Thanks for following this 20th episode of Painted Privacy, and see you next time with Luca Bolognini's artificial avatar.